This is the Connect podcast, where business meets leadership. We talk with influential newsmakers, business leaders, and decision makers important to New York's economy.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Connect podcast. I'm Heather Mulligan, President and CEO of the Business Council of New York State. Joining us today is the man known as the turnaround CEO. Peter Cuneo, recognized for his efforts to turn around multiple distressed businesses, including the Marvel franchise. And I have to say thank you for that. I have three boys and and two additional stepchildren, and everybody universally is a Marvel fan. I've watched many of the movies, including Guardians of the Galaxy, which very funny. My youngest son actually was playing music in the car that I'm like, how are you listening to this? It's stuff I listened to when I was a little kid, really. And it's one of the mixed tapes from Guardians of the Galaxy that he sort of fell in love with and kept playing all the time. Peter is also.
I will say this. I always, it's very important that I say that, we were very successful at Marvel, but I had a huge amount of help. And I was the CEO for between 3.5 and 4 years. And then I was vice chairman of the board for 6 years. But no one person never gets a job like that done. I was privileged to inherit, when I came to the company, some very good people, and then were able to attract a lot of other good people over the years. So a big team effort. Nobody can be good at everything in a creative business, which ultimately is what Marvel was. And so I was very blessed to have some super support.
Yeah, so what you're saying, your words actually are an indication you are a person who's demonstrated leadership abilities. And to me, the fact that you recognize that it's a team effort and it takes the talents of the people around you in order to achieve success is really a very good sort of indicator of a great leadership quality. And you've written a book about that, right? Superhero leadership.
Yeah, sure.
You want to talk?
I have no shame. I'll show it.
Yeah, it's great. And can you show the back on here too? Because
Sure,
that's pretty
some
cool.
people like the back better than the front.
Yeah.
Do I look like a superhero on there? I don't know, but
you do. You're bigger than the Hulk, so that's
Oh.
So let's talk about that. I know that you served in Vietnam, and I thank you for that. I think it's really important that we recognize the contributions of people who have served in the military, which includes a number of my family members as well.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about what got you sort of into the place that you are now, writing about leadership, and also, I didn't even get to most of your bio. I mean, you've turned around not just Marvel, but a number of other businesses. So you sort of have this track record of really successfully putting companies in a better place than they were when you got there. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I've done 7 turnarounds. Yes, most people remember for Marvel Entertainment. Marvel is still being called the greatest turnaround of the 21st century. I don't know if that's actually accurate, but it's nice to hear, of course. Yeah, I had done 6 before Marvel. I think the interesting point about doing turnarounds is that I actually never thought of my self-image. I had a positive self-image, but it didn't include taking on very distressed businesses that needed radical surgery to survive, taking them on and being good at it. And in fact, to be very honest, I was thrown into the first one by my boss, who saw something in me, some talent that I didn't see in myself, to be honest. And the first one, I learned a lot about myself and about how to turn around the leadership. The first 6 months, I was mentally depressed because I didn't think I had any skills in this at all. And then we started to have results. And when I really thought about it, it was about leadership and my style of leadership and outlook was quite different than the person who had been in the job before. Couldn't have been more different. And so I attributed, okay, the way I thought about leadership and people to helping with the turnaround. And I also did inherit some very good people in that first turnaround that had been suppressed, so to speak, by previous leadership. And once they were let loose, turned out to be really high quality people. And so, and I found that out in all my turnarounds, actually. Invariably, I would find some people who were really good, were not able to function at their best because the cultures. I would say that the first thing I had to address in a turnaround was the culture, the value system of the organization, which was always messed up. But once the culture changed, and it takes time, doesn't happen right away, these people were let go to show what they could do. And I was blessed by finding a lot of, I'll call it hidden talent in these turnarounds. But the point I'm trying to make is I had no idea when I went into the first one.
Do you think that your military service was a component in I guess that in order to be a leader you have to be one of the people that raises their hand, right? That at some point volunteers to be in charge of things or has an urge to do that. Do you think that's a factor
It's
or is it just everything?
no, it's Heather. It's a huge factor. Okay. Um, I served in the U.S. Navy for about 3.5 years. I was on a ship, the same ship for 3 years of that time was the USS Joseph Strauss, a guided missile destroyer. I did 2 tours on the Strauss into the war, one of 6 months, one of 7 months. The first time I went, I was damage control officer. I'm happy to say I had very little to do on that cruise because we actually never got hit.
Oh, good.
The second cruise, I was communications officer. And I think one of the great things about the military during wartime, and by the way, to make it clear, we never should have been in the Vietnam War. There was nothing to gain. But I have to say, I credit the war for making me as a leader. I'm not sure what my life would have been like without that experience. But I served under some great. I was also officer of the deck, the person who also drives the ship. In different times, the captains, of course, don't drive the ships anymore. They're too big and too complicated. So um, I was what's called fleet officer of the deck. I could drive the ship in the company of other ships. And the ship was 417 feet long, 60 feet across, weighed 20,000 metric tons. We had 320 sailors, 20 officers. Our guns had a range of 11 miles they could shoot at targets. And with nuclear tipped depth charges, again, no submarines to worry about really, but we had them. And we had an anti-plane, anti-aircraft, anti-air missile called the Tartar missile, which had a range of 20 miles. And so the Strauss was one of the first Navy ships to actually um, have missiles on board. Now they're on every ship, of course, but back then it was a very new thing. And when you're in combat, obviously you're going to learn a lot about leadership, good and bad. In my Navy case, almost all of it was good. You occasionally run into some poor leaders, but I would say the officers on the ship and the senior enlisted men, the Navy chiefs also, some of whom worked for me, even though I was a young green guy, that were terrific, I have to say. And so in combat, you cannot survive alone. It's a team effort, absolutely. And everybody knows that. And your unit, in our case, a ship, is dependent on everybody doing their job right and the best they can. And so I think that's where I really first really started to think about um, being successful with teams of diverse personalities, different diverse backgrounds, and what have you, because in the military, when you come together, that's what you'll find.
Yeah.
People from all different walks of life and what have you, and you need to be able to effectively depend on them, and they have to depend on you. And so, yeah, the Navy was the first time I had in a particular incident, uh, a very conscious thought. I want to be a leader in the future.
So how did you go directly to the private sector from the military? So trace the path a little.
No, I didn't. So another thing I'd say about my life is at various times I've been lucky enough to have people involved with me that actually thought, recognized things in me that I didn't in myself. And I just previously mentioned being thrown into my first turnaround. My boss, who I had a very good relationship with, saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And he turned out to be right. And the Navy is a lot like that. So the captain of my ship. So after 3.5 years, I was due to get out, and the Navy had to. The captain had come to me and said, "I have great news. The Navy wants you to stay in and make the Navy a career." And I love the Navy. And let's face it, all of us are. If we love something, we're going to be good at it.
Yeah.
It's just you know. And
Except
so
except for
I
golf.
had a very good run there, and I just loved the life and what have you. And but my new wife, I'd only been married about 9 months, um, really said to me flat out, "If you stay in, we're getting divorced."
Yeah.
Was the other I was what's called a surface warfare officer in the Navy. It's still a designation today of people that you see on the ships. And I was going to have to be, if I stayed in, at sea 6 months a year, more or less. And my wife knew she was going to have to raise our kids. We didn't have any kids yet. She was going to have to raise our kids alone. And she was not into that.
Yeah.
And I love the Navy, Heather, but I loved her more. And so I went to the captain and I said, I'm not going to stay in. So he said, "Okay, well, what are you going to do?" And I said, I really surprisingly hadn't thought much about it. I'm going to get a master's degree in something somewhere. I don't know. And he said to me, "Cuneo, you should go to Harvard Business School." And again, my self-image was not Ivy League. I thought Ivy Leaguers were rich and geniuses. I grew up in a middle-class family in Flushing, Queens, in New York City. My father was a fire lieutenant. My mother was an EMT, and they did well. But we were very middle class. And when I thought of that, I didn't see myself at all. And the captain said words to me that I still think about regularly. He said to me, "Cuneo, you don't know how good you are." Now, at the time, I just thought he was being nice. And I love this captain, by the way. One of the things is I had a lot of mentors in the Navy, and he was right at the top of the list. And I didn't take him serious. I thought he was just being nice to me, but to please him, he said to me, "Take the business boards," and I was always good at those tests for some reason, much better than my actual grades were. And so I got a very high grade. And so he said, "Okay, now you got to apply." And I'm going, "No way." My grades in an undergraduate school at Alfred University in upstate New York, a great school, #1 in the world in ceramic engineering, ceramic science, and ceramic art. And I was privileged to go there, but I started college too young. I was immature. I didn't first number of years I was there, I was a pretty poor student. And eventually I got it together. So my trend was very good, but my overall average was just average. And the captain said, "We'll get the application, and you got to write some estimates, and we're going to write one of them so that you point out how you really improved." You grew up, you had experiences and so on. Okay, why not, Captain? I still didn't didn't really think. And then I said to him, I need references from three people, and these other kids are getting references from senators, from presidents. I don't have any of that. Long story short, he had arranged for me to interview with three admirals. So my ship was home ported in Pearl Harbor. Uh, this is after my last deployment, and the ship was in dry dock. And Pearl Harbor is basically the headquarters for the second biggest job in the Navy. It's a job called SINCPAC Fleet Commander in Chief of the Pacific. And so I was able to go and interview with three admirals, and I was in shock. And I came back to the ship and said to the captain, or he asked me how to go. I said, well, I was okay. I didn't think I was great. And then he says to me, well, you don't have to worry about it because the letters went in last week. And I suddenly realized these admirals just want to be able to say they met me. And so I still didn't think that I would get in. The letter came. It was an acceptance. I thought they reached in the wrong pile when they were sending letters out, and I was going to show up. I admit I had imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
that I would be show up and they would say, "Who are you?"
Yeah.
Anyway, that didn't happen, and but I thought I don't belong here. I can't compete. And it took me about 3 months to realize not only that could I compete, but I could do really well. And in fact, I had academic honors. I was president of the International Business Club, and I really did well. And again, I had not realized, as my captain said, how good I was. And of course, the other students were not geniuses. There may be the odd genius. They were not geniuses. They were not all from rich families at all. But one thing they were was driven,
Yeah.
really driven to accomplish things, to be successful. That's what bound the class together. And so, I ended up going to Harvard Business School and getting a degree and out of the Navy, and then starting my business career.
Just amazing in and of itself. You've touched on so many things that I really resonate with me. One of which is I got great advice from a boss early on, which was to hire people to do things that are better at those things than you are. Because if you're threatened by their success, you're not going to be able to lead them. What you want is for them to be so good at it that at the end of the day, the success is owned by everyone. And I really, that sounds to me like you had that early on with this mentor who recognized your abilities, but then you carried that practice forward in the companies that you went to. You want to,
Yeah.
I mean, you've
Yes,
had
I think
so
that's
much
right.
success in turnarounds, and to me, that's there's a lot that we could talk about there. But you want to talk about like what was your biggest challenge or what you think of as your biggest success? And I mean, obviously, Marvel is the one everyone's going to look at because it was such an amazing story.
Yeah,
But
well,
I'd love to
I
hear your
started out just doing small divisions of big multinational companies. So these weren't independent. Later on, I did a whole big group of Black and Decker, which was 6 divisions. And then eventually I went to Remington Products, the shaver company,
yeah.
which was its own company. We had success there, and I got to Marvel because one of the owners of Remington, I had made a lot of money for, and when he needed a CEO at Marvel coming out of bankruptcy, he called me. That's how had I not gone to Remington, I would not have gotten to Marvel. And so, and I got a lot of calls to take on turnarounds, but most fail. So I had to do a lot of due diligence and a lot of, thinking about what would be required. But luckily, they all worked, they all worked out.
But did you ever, I mean, you never went in thinking, oh, this can't be done. I mean,
Oh
I
no,
think,
of course not. No,
yeah.
No, because if you're thinking that, that's what will happen.
Right, right.
Yes. Yes. You can't have a negative. You have to. I'm a very optimistic person by nature, thanks to my mother. My mother was very optimistic as a personality. Growing up as a little kid and later, she'd tell me almost every day, Peter, you can be whatever you want. And you know, my model for having success in life was my grandparents and my parents. My father, in addition to being lieutenant in New York City Fire Department, had been a Navy officer in World War II in the South Pacific, and then again in the Korean War. And my mother had been an EMT for 30 years. The last 10 years, she was just physically hard. It's only so long you can do that work. And so she became the dispatcher. And so I grew up with people who give back, and people who serve others. And one of the reasons I went in the Navy after I graduated from Alfred, I'd worked for a year, and then I decided I was going to look for some adventure. And even though, it never occurred to me the war would be that dangerous to me. Again, I was naive, but my father had served, and okay, I'm going in. And yeah, so my grandparents were all immigrants from Scotland via Nova Scotia in Canada, from Italy. My last name is Italian, of course, and from Sweden. And they came before the Depression to the U.S. Some of them didn't speak any English, and they survived, and they did absolutely fine, middle class and so on. But they all worked hard. The thing about all of them and my parents, they were not people who could sit at a desk. They had to be out there. And I guess I probably inherited some of their genes, maybe, but that's the way I've always been. I had to be out there. So turnarounds are about being out there. You're a fixer. You got to be out there talking to people, learning what the problems are, considering, solutions, and not sitting at your desk high and mighty all day long, summoning people to your office, for a meeting and that kind of thing. So I always wanted to be very visual, talking to people all the time, and so on. And I think it's one of the reasons I liked turnarounds. I was crazy because most people would never take these jobs, correctly so, by the way,
Yeah.
because of the risk. Most turnarounds fail. I don't have data I can support that statement with, but that's what I think I've seen.
Yeah.
Well, you have
Yeah.
to choose. There is risk. Now, there's a big reward, usually, if you're successful, there's a big financial reward. And you got to feel good about yourself. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but most people, I would say correctly, don't want to take on, get involved in a turnaround.
Right. I mean, there's always that, well, I don't want to take a job on a sinking ship. You have to believe that
Right.
you have to believe that you're going to be able to change the course of it. And I mean, I think
Sure.
it takes an incredible person to do that, right? To take on a really big challenge like that. If there's a whole
Or
generation of us.
incredible or crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I'm
either
not sure.
way.
I don't know. I don't think of myself as incredible, but crazy, yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, risk taking and leadership are not mutually exclusive at all, right?
No, well, actually, people some ask me for my definition in about leadership. I have several podcasts. I have the book, which we just showed, which just came out recently
Yeah.
called Superhero Leadership. I do speeches. I've been doing speeches for 20 years around the world on leadership. And I often ask the audience to think about their definition of leadership. What is it? I'm not looking for anyone to tell me. Just take 30 seconds. And then I tell them what my definition is. But in the end, they're just two words that describe leadership. The first is courage. The second is change.
Yeah.
And it's the courage to make change. Now, some leadership jobs require very little change, and that's great. Okay. Some, like what I've done, require big changes. And so it varies, but if you're a leader, whatever your organization is, it could be business, it could be non-business, it could be nonprofit, it could be the military, it could be education, it could be government, it could be religion. We can go on and on, all these different things where you could be involved and have people working for you or people that are dependent on you. And in the end, there will be changes you'll have to make. Most of the time, hopefully, they're small, easy to make, not very stressful. But on the other extreme, they can be big and stressful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about what you're doing now. I know that you work on the Dolphin Foundation board. Do you want to talk about what that is and what motivated you to set it up?
Yeah, so I'm involved in several nonprofit organizations. I'm on the board of the National Archives Foundation in Washington. I've been on that board for 15 years. The National Archives is the government department that keeps all the records of the United States government from day one. Last count, I think the archives has 22 billion documents. Now, 5 billion are digital because that's now most of what they get, not paper. They do have the largest collection of antique maps, of photographs, of film in the world, and so on. The foundation is not part of the government. We exist really to raise money so that the archives can put on exhibitions about our history that are on display at the headquarters in Washington and then go around the country and that educate Americans about our history and what have you. And these are programs that the government doesn't fund. We think they're very important. So
Yes.
our main job is to raise. Our offices are actually in the archives building, which is in Washington and is amazing. It's where you can go and see you know, you the where you can see the documents of freedom. Okay, so I'm talking about the Constitution, the
Right.
Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, and so on, and go through a lot of these exhibits also in the building. It's a very, very special place. And I'm on that board because I love history. History's always been a hobby. And I think the past is prologue. And by studying history, you can learn about a lot about leadership. Because we all behave. We're driven by the same, fears and hopes and dreams, you know, and celebrations as the same human beings 1,000 years ago. Really, the way they behave then isn't really much different from the way we behave. And so I like that. The Dolphin Foundation is basically an organization that raises money to benefit underprivileged kids, primarily high school students in New York City and Long Island. And so we put on programs, educational programs and others, for those students. And we raise, again, money from a lot of well-meaning and great corporations and what have you. Obviously, we're not for profit.
Yep.
And we've had the pleasure of having a lot of students go through our programs and some who, from obviously very downtrodden neighborhoods in the city go to MIT.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing when you see this happen because they deserve to go to MIT. Okay. Things like that. And so we feel very good about that. And the dolphin name comes from the fact that we're dolphins. We swim with dolphins. We don't swim with sharks. So we have a lot of aggressive people, don't get me wrong, in our organization and so on. We're very good with their money and or their time, but they're good people.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting. Dolphins, if you study dolphin behavior, when a dolphin in one of the packs is actually hurt, believe it or not, the dolphins, the rest of them, the pack, literally get under the dolphin and push that dolphin up to the surface of the ocean and continue to hold them up until they recover, which could be weeks in some
Yeah.
cases. So dolphins work together, and they come to the aid. And we have uh we have a lot of people who are dedicated to giving back, whether it's NY, we're very close to the NYPD. I give a leadership lecture to the top 150 officers in the NYPD every couple of months. Obviously, I do that, gratis. I'm thrilled to do it, frankly. Um, and but we're close to many organizations like that, and what have you. And and we work with them as well on programs and so on. So I think we started 10 years ago.
Yeah.
My partner, the other founder, Jeremiah Schnee is his name, says it's longer than that, and he's probably right. And
Well, maybe we need a
Jeremiah,
dolphin
yeah,
superhero. Maybe there's already one, but something to pitch to Marvel. Marvel is now we talked a little bit about the turnaround, but it was acquired by Disney, correct?
yes. So I had a 10-year run at Marvel for almost 4 years, from 1999 to 2003 as CEO, and then from 3 to 2009 as vice chairman, a 10-year run. And
Yeah.
then we sold to Disney, yes, in 2009. So I've been out of Marvel for what, 16 years?
You could probably still pitch a dolphin superhero, though, right? I mean, I'm sure you still know people.
I do know people, but people often ask me, what do I think of Marvel's movies today and what have you? And frankly, I try to duck those conversations. I can explain what's different about what we did. We were very successful, but times change,
Yeah,
and that doesn't mean what we did 25 years ago, is the same thing that they should be doing today. And I'm not on the inside, so I really don't like to guess at what
right.
might be right or wrong. It's not fair.
So if you were talking directly to someone, very early in their career with maybe challenges in front of them, um, but they have aspirations and what advice, like, is there pieces of advice that you would give to them? Um,
The overall advice is very simple. Take risks. Most of the risks you take, if you don't make it or fail, there's really no negative.
right.
I'll go back to me applying to Harvard. Okay, if I didn't get in, okay,
Yeah.
wasn't going to die. That this is not the end of the world. And so I'm lucky because I had a lot of people in my life saying, Peter, you don't know how good you are,
Yeah.
and go for it. And I had nothing to lose in most cases, and they all worked out. So very often when I meet young people, I meet a lot of young people still, and get to know them a little bit and see that I'm repeating what that captain said to me, God, I don't know, 50 years ago plus, which was, so, you don't know how good you are. Go for it. And sometimes they do and have very good results. What disappoints me the most is when they just don't try,
Yeah.
you know.
You
And
miss
that's sad.
100% of the
That's sad
shots,
because you
right?
never
Isn't
know.
it the saying you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take?
Well, I mean, look, there's always things maybe you just know for sure. Let me, if someone said to me, why don't you, I'm going to make an absurd statement here. Why don't you go to the local hospital and do a heart transplant? Obviously, I'm not going to take that risk. I mean, I'm
Right.
being absurd here. But so there are situations where maybe it is appropriate. All right, it's really a bridge too far, really too far, and so on. But in most cases, I think you don't have anything to lose. But the one thing I would say is go for it for real. Put your heart into it.
Right.
Don't. And I've learned this the hard way. In case of case of Harvard, I got lucky because my captain pushed me. My heart wasn't totally in it. I have to be honest. And then I learned taking risks after that. Oh yeah, my heart's got to be, if you're going to go for this, you're going a
Right.
1,000%. You're all in from minute one. The minute you walk through the door, you're in,
Yeah.
and every minute counts. But I learned that from that experience.
Yeah. Well, it's incredible advice, and I can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this. Is there anything else you would want to share before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think one last theme, so to speak. One of my great concerns today is that we have less good leadership in the world than maybe ever in human history. And I'm not being political here. I'm just turn on the news, take a look at what's happening, not only in the US, but around the world. We have chaos
Yeah.
and we have very poor leadership in general. Of course, there's exceptions, but generally speaking, okay? So, connected with that, one of my big concerns is that young people are not learning leadership. Why not? What can we do about that? What can they do about it? What can their parents do about that? I define young people as age 5 to age 30. Believe it or not, I can describe to you how someone age 5 can start to learn leadership. But um, we there's a whole bunch of reasons why the kids aren't learning leadership. You wouldn't be surprised by any of them. But if you're some young person involved, interested in leadership, and there's some things you really need to understand and to pursue. The real reason, mostly, that young people are not learning shit is because they're not having face-to-face interactions with a diversity of other people
Yeah.
in their professional life, their personal life, if they're in school, their academic life, um, and uh, and and, and geographical diversity is helpful too. The only way you learn the instincts of leadership is to have as many of these experiences with different people as you can, because then you will begin to understand and even become adept at getting other people to see your point of view, to motivate other people, to understand how to work with a lot of people who are very different one from each other. But the only way you can do that is that face to face.
Yeah.
Kids today are just not getting that. The technology is the enemy of, and it's very important. Here's my cell phone.
Right.
Oh, of course, no one's going to learn leadership off a cell phone. And unfortunately, young people don't understand even that people will say stuff to you on the cell phone they'd never say to your face.
Yeah.
Okay. And say really crazy stuff. And a lot of it's not true. Young people have not learned how to actually evaluate what's true, what's not true. We have another problem, overparenting.
Hmm.
Okay. We have parents who have decided that their children should not never have a negative thought about themselves, and eventually the people that have that, I talk to CEOs and other C-suite people all the time. They tell me horror stories about those kids when they graduate, including from great schools, go in the real world, and the first time something negative goes wrong, stuff that you and I, Heather, would laugh at, they're
Right.
completely
Yeah.
destroyed. They're completely destroyed. So these kids today, it's not everyone. There are exceptions, certainly. How you're raised is a big part of being an exception. They don't have social skills. They don't have work ethic. And they have, it's not that they're thin skinned, they have no skin.
Yeah.
And of course there are exceptions. And those exceptions are going to do very well because they will be the leaders, but we need more of them. And so this is very important. And I have on, if your audience wants to go to petercuneo.com, they'll see a lot of interesting stuff. But one of the things I have there is the 15 things I recommend for young people to learn leadership. And most of them
Excellent.
are face to face experiences with a diversity of people. So, real quick here, for example, team sports.
Yeah.
I don't care if you're the worst athlete on the team. I don't care. You still have to work together as a team with a common goal, and whether you're successful or not will be very obvious. Of performing arts as a team sport, same idea. You're working together, diverse group. You want to have a hit show or a musical or whatever you're working on, takes a team, very diverse, to come
Yep.
together. Okay, same thing. A semester abroad, obviously, studying away a semester from college, particularly in a country where they don't speak English. My two sons, one went to Italy, one went to France, is a great way to start to learn the instincts for other people. And I have a list of 50 items, and some of them were controversial when I first put them out. Things like let your kids fail.
Yeah.
Now, I have the view, and I tell my audiences, you need to fail to succeed, to be successful. And, 10 years ago, the audience was like looking at me like they're heading 200 people shaking their head no. Today, they're all going yes.
Yeah.
Okay. It sounds crazy and backwards. I know. But, you know, kids today need to learn their strengths and their weaknesses. One of the problems with overparenting is they don't learn any weaknesses because their parents don't allow them to. Okay. The way we survive as human beings is kind of simple. Okay, we have our strengths, and yeah, we're going to work with those, but on our weaknesses, okay, some we're going to work to get better. Some it's appropriate to just avoid. It's fine, whatever's appropriate. But all humans have weaknesses. None of us are perfect. And it's silly to pretend otherwise. The key is not to pretend, the key is to learn, to face ourselves and get to know ourselves. And that takes a little courage, frankly, you know,
Yeah.
because most of us as human beings have a cocoon. Okay. We all do. I do. I'm sitting here. Okay. I have a self image. I'm feeling pretty good about my self image. I'm getting some good feedback. But frankly, in my career, every once in a while, wow, I got a wake up call and it was not pleasant. And it had to do with me and decision making and my behavior in some cases. And I had to adjust and I had to admit, oh, yeah, I really need to take that seriously. And sometimes my mistakes were the best things that ever happened to me. I know that sounds nuts, but as long as you take it seriously, it was not someone else's fault. It was
Yeah.
not bad luck. You blew it. Okay. Heather, I know you never blow it.
Oh
Obviously.
no,
No, you are perfect. I
I'm a
can tell.
big believer in recognizing, trying things and when they fail, learning from them, and you use that to adjust course. And I think it's really important. What you said about, you know, um, getting to know a diversity of people and opinions is something I'm a firm believer in. I think we're a very siloed society. So one more time with your website, and then we'll
Yeah.
wrap up.
So my website is petercuneo.com. For those of you who are listening and not watching, my last name is spelled Cuneo. And you will see a lot of stuff on that site. There's other things as well. All of the podcasts are on that site, as well as other places. You can, so if you want to listen to the podcast or second season, we also, recorded visually, so you'll see myself talking to a guest. Um, you, if you're interested in hearing, getting me to speak at a certain group, there's some information on how to do that there. My bio is there. There's a lot of stuff you might find interesting. Probably the most interesting though is, and getting back to the book. Okay. The book says, superhero leadership, 28 ways to lead with courage, strength, and compassion. Well, there are 28 chapters around the 28 ways in the book. And those 28, what I call essentials, 28 essentials for superhero leadership are there on petercuneo.com. You can copy them. It'll take you 7 or 8 minutes to read them. You can think about yourself and how you do against them. And it can be your report card. Break it out for yourself every 2 months, I don't know, 3 months, 1 month, and see how you think you're doing. But be honest with yourself. Nobody gets all A's,
Right.
including me. And I've been working with this thing for over 20 years. There are certain things the best I can ever do is get a C because I have certain personality traits, and I have to work to get that C, so, but I think you'd find that very interesting. They're very easy to read. I'll just tell you the first one, I'll give you an idea. The very first one says, show positive energy from minute one. That goes to being optimistic, etc. How many bosses have you known or leaders you've known, we've all known, that don't do that?
Yeah.
They're grumpy. They want to blame other people for problems. They're looking for, excuses that don't involve them. They're, whatever. Well, how do you think the organization? It's really simplistic, but they're all like that. You can read
Yeah.
all 28. Some of them will apply to you depending on your age. Some might be ones that you'll run into a little bit old when you're a little bit older. But basically, take a look and see what you think. And you can grade other people, grade your boss. I often get questions and I'm going to shut up here, Heather. I'm sorry. But I get questions in my speeches. Peter, how do you grade blah, 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 XYZ? A politician or somebody else? And I always tell them that I have no answer to that because I don't grade politicians or any people per se. Because if I did, the quote that would be coming out of this speech would be, you know what Peter said about so and so?
Yeah.
And I that's not why I'm there. It's lack of leadership. Young people need to learn. That's why I'm there. So, but at any rate, I tell the audience, what do you think of XYZ? Great. Take the 28 and grade and see how they come out.
Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate this and everything that you do. And I hope everyone goes to your website and we all learn a little bit more about leadership. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
This has been a presentation of the Connect podcast, produced by the Business Council, the voice of employers in New York State.